Imagine yourselves in the heart of Damascus, the capital of the world, in the year 132 of the Hijra. The majestic Umayyad minarets that once embraced the clouds of heaven began to darken, and their grand walls began to tremble. That great empire, which ruled with justice and the sword from the borders of China in the east to the Pyrenees Mountains of France in the west, was falling like autumn leaves in the blink of an eye. The black banners of the Abbasids were rising in every alleyway, and their soldiers were spreading like a devastating flood. Driven by fierce hatred, they hunted down anyone who carried a single drop of Umayyad blood, never distinguishing between an old man and a nursing infant. Amidst this absolute terror and the weeping sound of swords, there was a young man in the prime of his 20 years, named al-Rahman ibn Muawiyah. Al-Rahman was not merely a privileged prince raised amidst the silk and luxury of palaces. He was a brilliant youth, carrying in his sorrowful eyes a strange gleam, the gleam of the prophecy of his visionary grandfather, Maslama ibn Abdul Malik. His grandfather had looked at him one day when he was a child, shook his head in astonishment, and said, "This is the boy who will rebuild our glory and revive our great kingdom after its loss and fracture." When the siege grew fierce and death knocked at the doors, Abdurrahman fled under the cover of darkness. He took with him his little brother, Ubaydullah, who had not yet reached the dream of youth, and his deeply loyal servant, Badr, who had pledged his entire life to serve his master. They left those magnificent palaces behind and abandoned the garments of silk to throw themselves into the embrace of barren deserts, where grueling exhaustion, scorching thirst, and a relentless hunt never subsided. They ran for days without knowing the taste of sleep, until the bloodthirsty horses of the Abbasids reached the shores of the Euphrates River, where the ultimate prize stood right before them. As the noose tightened, the leaders of the pursuing army shouted in a loud, deceptive voice, "You have our amnesty, O sons of Umayyah. Come back to us, and you shall have our covenant and protection." The little brother, Ubaydullah, panicked. Overwhelmed by exhaustion, he believed those false promises, turned back, and began swimming toward the shore they had just fled. Abdurrahman stood on the opposite bank, tears burning his cheeks, crying out at the top of his lungs, "Oh, my brother, come back. Do not believe them. My brother, come back, for they will kill you." But destiny was swifter. Before the horrified eyes of the prince, and in full view of the river that witnessed the tragedy, the little brother was beheaded in cold blood, without a shadow of mercy, and his body was thrown into the dust. At that terrifying second, the broken young Abdurrahman died, and from the womb of pain, a king of iron was born, Abdurrahman al-Dakhil. He wiped his tears with the pride of kings, and nothing remained for him in this world but to turn his face westward, marching toward the unknown, crossing the wilderness toward the continent of Africa. For 5 long, entire years, Abdurrahman lived as a fugitive, wandering through North Africa among the tribes. He never closed his eyes except with a vigilant gaze, his hand firmly gripping the hilt of his sword for fear of betrayal by spies. Yet, throughout this entire ordeal, he was not just a fugitive looking to save his own skin. His mastermind worked without ceasing, analyzing the political reality of the Islamic world with surgical precision. At that crucial time, Al-Andalus was burning with internal strife, torn apart by destructive tribal conflicts between the Qaysite and Yemenite factions, becoming a rich land without a true master to unite its ranks. It was then that the young prince realized the historic moment had arrived. He sent his loyal servant, Badr, on a secret maritime journey, carrying a letter written with the ink of sheer determination, addressed to the Umayyad loyalists scattered across Al-Andalus. Abdurrahman did not ask them for money to spend, nor for prestige to live by, but he penned a single sentence that shook their very souls, saying, "I am the remnant of your kingdom whom destiny has exiled. Is there any savior to support my cause?" When the news reached the tyrannical governor of Al-Andalus, Yusuf al-Firi, and he questioned his advisors about the nature of this young man coming from the desert, learning that he was the descendant of the caliphate, Abdurrahman ibn Muawiyah, his limbs trembled. He uttered his famous words that history books have immortalized. "By God, if his feet step onto this land, this kingdom will slip from our hands, and our state will vanish forever." In the year 138 of the Hijra, amidst the tumultuous waves of the sea, Abdurrahman courageously leaped into a small wooden boat to cut through the depths toward Al-Andalus. The boat anchored on the shore of Al-Munkar, and he stepped onto the land with fierce audacity. He did not march with a massive army to the beating of drums, nor with horsemen filling the horizon. He walked alone, a stranger, but his heart sheltered a dream as vast as the entire nation. With extraordinary political brilliance and an eloquence that captured hearts, Abd-ar-Rahman won over the resentful Yemenite tribes. Through his wisdom, he managed to gather the scattered loyalists under his banner. And on the day of the decisive Battle of Mazara, which determined the fate of al-Andalus, this young man, who had not yet exceeded his 26 years, stood guiding his men against the colossal armies of Governor al-Fihri. Before the swords crossed and the battle began, Abd-ar-Rahman noticed some of his soldiers whispering among themselves with fear, saying, "The prince rides a fast mare, and he only chose her to flee and save his skin if the wheel turns against us and we are defeated." Did the prince get angry? No. Instead, he taught them an unforgettable lesson in sacrifice. He immediately dismounted his fast mare and requested a small, slow mule with short steps. He rode it in front of their ranks and shouted to them, "I have only mounted this slow mule so that all my companions know that I cannot flee the battlefield. It will be either victory or martyrdom." The enthusiasm of the soldiers ignited, swords were unsheathed, and a fierce battle ensued, from which Abd-ar-Rahman emerged gloriously victorious. He entered the capital of power, Córdoba, as a giant conqueror, proclaiming from its minbars the birth of the glorious Umayyad state in al-Andalus. And instead of opening the prisons of vengeance or hanging his enemies who had hunted him, he set a magnificent example of absolute pardon when in power. He secured his opponents, united all voices, and immediately began founding and building the greatest scientific and architectural civilization known to humanity during the dark ages of Europe. Do you know, noble listeners, who gave him this eternal title, the Falcon of Quraysh? It was not his relatives, nor the poets of his court, but rather his greatest and most formidable archenemy of all time. The powerful Abbasid caliph, Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, was sitting one day in Baghdad amidst his court and companions. He turned to them and asked, "Tell me, who is the Falcon of Quraysh among the kings?" They replied, flattering him, "It is you, O commander of the faithful." He said, "No, it is not me." They said, "Is it then Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan?" He said, "No." They said, "Is it then the great Abdul Malik ibn Marwan?" He said, "No, it is not him." Perplexed, those present asked, "Who is it then, O commander of the faithful?" Abu Ja'far al-Mansur then pronounced his historic words, which are taught to this day in the books of politics and civilization. Rather, it is Abd-ar-Rahman ibn Muawiyah, he who crossed the raging sea, traversed the terrifying wilderness, and entered a foreign land entirely alone. There, he founded cities, mobilized armies, and established a great kingdom after its interruption, all through his excellent strategy, profound resourcefulness, and firmness of character. This is truly the Falcon of Quraysh, and none other than him. Abd-ar-Rahman al-Dakhil passed away after years of struggle, leaving behind the jewel of the world, Córdoba, like a rising sun dispelling the dark night of Europe with the light of science and philosophy. This man left us an eloquent lesson that lives on in our souls. He taught us that the word impossible is but an abandoned term found only in the dictionary of the weak and helpless, and that a fugitive, triquet, and solitary man can shape history and ascend the thrones of glory if he possesses an unbreakable will and a wise mind to govern his destiny.